Before you watch, like, comment, and subscribe right now to join the movement exposing hidden truths in the entertainment world. Before the headlines, before the lawsuits, before the FBI raids, there was a man who warned everyone about P. Diddy 10 years ago, Gene Deal. Most people don't recognize the name, but in the mid-90s to early 2000s, Gene Deal was more than just a security guard. He was Diddy's personal protection, a man paid to keep secrets buried, reputations clean, and enemies far away. Gene wasn't just hired muscle, he was trusted. He stood beside Diddy during some of the most dangerous moments in hip-hop history, the height of the East Coast versus West Coast War, the mysterious deaths of Biggie and Tupac, and the rise of Bad Boy Records into an empire. He witnessed what no one else could: private jet flights, studio meetings, closed-door events, mansion parties with no cameras allowed. And when Biggie was gunned down in Los Angeles in 1997, Gene was one of the last people to see him alive. That night left a mark, not just emotionally, but spiritually. Gene says something changed inside him that night, because the events surrounding Biggie's death and the silence that followed didn't sit right. Over time, Gene started to distance himself from the industry, and when he finally started speaking out in interviews years later, people were shocked. They expected bitterness. What they got was something else. He wasn't loud. He wasn't dramatic. He was detailed, calm, precise. He talked about surveillance, manipulation, about artists who changed after spending time with Diddy behind closed doors. He questioned the official stories. He named names. Gene didn't just speak about what he saw. He spoke about what no one else dared to say out loud. That there was a culture of fear, a system of control, a silence that wasn't loyalty, it was survival. And while the media shrugged him off as just another disgruntled employee, something strange began to happen. His interviews, once buried on obscure channels, started going viral. Clips resurfaced. People started connecting dots. Because what Gene said in 2013, 2014, and beyond started to sound a lot like what accusers were saying in 2024. The timing? Too close. The details? Too accurate. And now, people are finally listening to the man who stood in the shadows for years. The man who tried to warn the world about Diddy before the world was ready to hear it. What Gene Deal said wasn't just vague rumors or conspiracy theory chatter, it was a direct warning. When Gene started speaking out, he didn't just share generic stories. He painted a picture so chilling, it made the music industry look like something out of a thriller film.
Puff ain't the only one that's doing this. He's just been talking about what he has said and what he did, bro.
The first thing Gene exposed? Control. And not just any control, Diddy's hold over everyone in his orbit. Gene described how artists, some of the biggest names in the game, were subtly controlled by Diddy. He talked about how these artists would come to the mansion for what they thought were simple meetings, only to leave changed. Diddy has a way of breaking people down, Gene said. He gets into your head, makes you believe you need him, and once you're in, it's hard to get out. It wasn't just business. It wasn't just music. It was psychological warfare. Gene made it clear. Diddy wasn't just a mogul. He was a puppeteer, pulling strings, pulling favors, and always staying 2 steps ahead. And if you crossed him, you'd be silenced. For good. The man who once stood behind the most powerful man in hip-hop also exposed another side of Diddy, one that was darker than anyone could have imagined. Gene talked about late-night parties, private, exclusive events where the glitz and glamour of Hollywood were overshadowed by something sinister. These parties weren't just about having fun. They were about control, and sometimes manipulation. You'd be surprised who showed up to those parties, Gene said. It wasn't just celebrities. There were people who had power, real power, people who controlled more than just the music industry.
You don't hire 6 different lawyers or 7 for different situations unless you've been involved in those different situations and you need 6 top lawyers to handle it. Talking about drugs, talking about guns, talking about sex trafficking. You understand?
Gene didn't stop there. He hinted at things that made many people uncomfortable to even hear. He spoke about strange, unexplainable things happening behind closed doors, things that made people fear for their lives and for their careers. One of the most disturbing parts of Gene's story? Diddy's silent system of keeping his inner circle loyal. Gene claimed that everyone was watched, every conversation, every action monitored. It wasn't just the artists. Even the people close to him had to watch their backs. Gene went as far as to talk about the rumors surrounding Biggie's death, the way things were handled in the aftermath. There were stories, whispers, about Diddy's involvement. Gene didn't name names, but he said it was a situation that could have been avoided if things were different. And when you look at the fact that Biggie's death still remains a mystery to this day, it starts to feel like Gene's warning wasn't just about Diddy's control over artists, it was about Diddy's control over the narrative, over everything. Everything happens for a reason. People are silenced for a reason. They never get the chance to speak out. And when they do, it's too late. These weren't just the ramblings of someone bitter about his past job. Gene's words were measured, carefully considered, and for anyone willing to listen, they were warnings. Warnings about an industry where fame comes at a price that can change who you are and how far you're willing to go to stay on top. And while many people ignored him, laughed him off as paranoid, or simply didn't want to believe that the world they saw in the spotlight could be that dark, Gene's predictions are starting to come true. In 2014, when Gene Deal started speaking out, most people didn't want to listen. It's hard to imagine now, with everything coming to light in 2024 and beyond, but back then, the world wasn't ready for Gene's story. Diddy was untouchable, an icon, a mogul, the face of hip-hop culture. The idea that someone like him could be involved in anything underhanded? It was simply unthinkable. He was a bodyguard, a man who worked in the shadows. How could he possibly know what went on in the inner circle? That's what the media and the public thought. They laughed off Gene's claims, dismissing them as the ramblings of a bitter former employee. After all, how could a man who stood in the background of the glitz and glam of hip-hop parties, bodyguarding celebrities, possibly have the inside track on the dark side of the industry? But there was more to it. Gene's words didn't fit the narrative. They didn't match the picture of Diddy that the world knew, the charming businessman with his shiny suits, his flashy parties, his empire built on hip-hop greatness. The idea that this man, this larger-than-life figure, could be anything less than perfect? It was too much for people to handle. So they chose to ignore it. Gene's interviews didn't get the coverage they deserved. They were buried, labeled as just another conspiracy theory. The mainstream media wasn't interested in giving Gene a platform. They didn't want to entertain the possibility that the music mogul everyone admired could be a part of something darker. But what Gene was talking about wasn't about bitterness. It was about truth. Gene wasn't just some disgruntled ex-employee airing his grievances. He was a man who had seen things, experienced things that others couldn't even fathom. And while the public was too focused on Diddy's success and the image he carefully crafted, Gene was warning everyone about the consequences of that very image. He tried to tell us about the control, the manipulation, the hidden systems of power that operated behind the scenes. He tried to explain how fame and fortune in this industry came with a steep, invisible price. But no one wanted to listen. The thing about power is that it doesn't like to be challenged. And when you do, you become a threat. That's what Gene said. That's why his warnings were ignored. It wasn't just about his past as Diddy's bodyguard. It was about something far bigger. The system of fear and loyalty that runs through the entertainment industry, the one that keeps everyone in check. Gene wasn't just pointing out the cracks in Diddy's empire. He was exposing the entire system that allowed it to exist. But for people like Gene, who dared to speak out against the giant, there was a cost. He wasn't just risking his career, he was risking his life. No one wants to be the whistleblower. No one wants to be the one who risks everything. Gene knew what could happen when you expose too much. And the sad reality? Many people didn't want to risk their own position in the industry to validate Gene's claims. It was easier to dismiss him than to face the uncomfortable truth he was speaking. And so, the world moved on, ignoring the man who saw it all. Until now. Fast forward to 2024, and everything Gene Deal warned us about is coming true. For years, Gene's claims about Diddy were brushed aside as the ravings of a disgruntled ex-bodyguard. But now, it's impossible to ignore the parallels. The shocking allegations, the accusations of abuse, control, and manipulation. They're no longer whispers in the shadows. They've become headlines. Gene's warnings about Diddy's empire, a world built on secrecy, fear, and power, have started to unfold before our eyes. The most significant piece of this puzzle? Cassie's lawsuit. In 2024, Cassie Ventura, a former girlfriend of Diddy, filed a bombshell lawsuit against him. The details were explosive, revealing claims of physical abuse, emotional manipulation, and years of control. But that wasn't the most shocking part. The lawsuit hinted at something far darker, something Gene Deal had been warning us about all along. Cassie's legal action came at a time when many victims, some anonymous, others less so, were finally speaking out about their experiences with Diddy. Stories about manipulation, about people being silenced and threatened, began to emerge from different corners of the industry. Gene's words were coming to life, and the patterns were undeniable. But Cassie's case isn't the only one. There are now multiple ongoing investigations, federal and local, into the allegations surrounding Diddy's past. Reports of FBI raids, subpoenas, and confidential testimonies have sent shockwaves through the entertainment world. The very same type of secrecy Gene had described in his interviews years ago is now being exposed in courtrooms and police stations across the country. The next piece of the puzzle? Diddy's closest allies are starting to turn on him. Witnesses who once swore loyalty to him are backing out, changing their testimonies, and coming forward with their own disturbing accounts of what they saw and experienced during their time with him. People who were once in Diddy's inner circle, the same people Gene warned us about, are now revealing the dark side of that empire. When you have this many people coming forward, this many lawsuits piling up, something doesn't add up. It's not just coincidence. That's the reality that's starting to sink in. Gene Deal's predictions about Diddy's empire aren't just theories anymore. They're becoming documented truths. And what's even more chilling is that the revelations are just beginning. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning of what we're about to see unfold. From lawsuits to testimonies, from investigations to shocking interviews, it's becoming clear that Diddy's past is catching up with him. And Gene, who tried to warn everyone a decade ago, is finally being proven right. For years, Gene was painted as a paranoid, bitter man. But now, his warnings are no longer being ignored. The truth is coming to light, and there's no turning. Gene Deal's warnings about Diddy's empire have been proven true. The mogul's carefully crafted image is cracking as lawsuits, investigations, and testimonies pile up. For years, Gene's claims were dismissed, but now the world is listening. The real question is, how far does the corruption go? And who else is involved in what's been hidden for so long? If you found this story as chilling as I did, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into true crime stories. And as always, stay safe, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next one.